countries across the world, normal education is on hold because of coronavirus. Millions of children are being taught at home by parents and carers. So what are the biggest concerns and challenges of mass homeschooling? This is Roundtable. With schools closed in so many countries, learning has moved from the classroom to the living room. It's an unexpected challenge for parents and children alike.
Education systems around the world are working to react to the coronavirus pandemic. Schools in over 100 countries have been closed to protect against the spread of coronavirus, affecting the education of nearly 1 billion children. In many places, it will be down to parents to keep their child's education going as best they can. Schools are using existing platforms from the likes of Microsoft and Google, as well as conferencing apps like Zoom, to deliver lessons for their pupils. In the UK, virtual gym classes delivered by fitness instructor Joe Wicks have proved extremely popular. With children now learning at home due to the pandemic, digital homeschooling is providing an alternative form of education. Experts believe the innovations teachers used during the outbreak may lead to lasting change, with technology playing a bigger role in schools in the future. So with schools closed for the foreseeable future, how can parents make sure their children are happy and learning at home?
Time to introduce our guests, and joining us on the roundtable today from London we have Jacqueline Daniell, who is the CEO of Wey Education plc. That's an online education provider. In Visp in Switzerland we have Dr. Paula Rothermel, who is a child and educational psychologist, and in London we have Pauline Hughes, who is a co-founder of Vivid State and also a mum of 3. Thank you very much indeed for being with us on the programme. So with schools closed, many parents were plunged into what was an unexpected reign of homeschooling. What are the main challenges from your point of view? Let me start with you, Pauline. You are doing homeschooling.
Yeah.
How is it? How are you coping?
You know, it absolutely has its challenges and it has its benefits as well. So what we're trying to do is just take each day as it comes, to really celebrate any achievements that we've made every day, and to make sure everybody's working together to come up with a solution that works. So my children are 5, 9 and 11, and we all work together on thinking about what we want to do in the week ahead, putting together a schedule, etc. And I think the key thing is to be really flexible around that schedule, because things can shift and change and they might want to do different things, and that's fine. And we also need to be flexible so that we can fit our work in as well around the edges.
And Paula, it's a huge psychological change, isn't it, too? How might this be affecting people?
I think particularly for parents that are working, it's going to be very difficult indeed. It also depends on the ages of the children. If you have younger children, I expect it's far more of a challenge than for those with teenagers that are a little bit more self-sufficient. I think psychologically the impact is where parents feel they really have to do something, and I think my fear is that from speaking to parents, that some parents are overdoing. They become anxious when I think they need to take a step back and not become so anxious about what's expected of them by the school.
Is that something you've experienced, Pauline?
Well, I think that it's really easy to fall into the trap where you want to be perfect in the same way as you want to be a perfect parent. You know, there's a whole industry around that. So we all struggle with feeling guilty that we're not getting it right, and looking at how other people seem to be doing it and thinking, oh, I'm not really doing as well as they are. Their children seem to be doing much better with this than mine are, you know, and it's very, very easy to start to think of yourself as a failure. So I think we need to cut that out first off.
And Jacqueline, you're an education provider. What are the challenges from your point of view of providing an education online?
Well, obviously, it's a lot different for us because we're set up entirely, for that situation. So we are dealing with families up until now, obviously, that have chosen to be in this situation. So it's very different, really. with COVID-19, nobody, neither the children nor the parents, have chosen to be educated at home, usually by one or both of their parents. So there's different kinds of homeschooling in this situation. And what we're used to dealing with is people who have chosen this as a lifestyle option, or for those who the local school isn't the best solution for them. So yeah, we're seeing a lot more inquiries from parents, like Paula, who might be finding it difficult. And don't forget, we're set up as a school. So in just the same way that there are classes and age groups and year groups in a traditional physical school, we have that online as well, where parents in this situation are trying to cope with children of various ages. And obviously they're at different stages in their learning, might be natural learners in different ways. That's an awful lot for any parent to cope with.
And as you say, some people have chosen homeschooling as an option. Most parents in this situation have been thrust into a surprising occasion where they are having to undertake this home learning. How does that affect people psychologically, both parents and children?
I think that they both struggle initially. I think children perhaps are very generally speaking, much more adaptable. So I think it's probably harder for the parents in the first instance. And as was said earlier, you have this pressure that we put upon ourselves to be the perfect parent. Now they're asking themselves to be the perfect teacher as well. And obviously we all know that teachers spend some time qualifying. They then act as newly qualified teachers. They go to a different place of work, a building that's set up to deliver teaching. So the pressure is really on because this is in their own home, often juggling a job as well, working from home. The rest of the family there also quarantined. It's a mixture of things that is really a recipe for disaster, but I believe that most families are coping really, really well.
And Paula, you, of course, being an expert in psychology, what's your view on how it's affecting parents and children?
There are certainly parents I'm speaking to that are relishing the challenge, the chance to connect with the children, or reconnect, or carry on connecting, but in a different way. And I think for some parents are seeing this as an opportunity, and I would certainly encourage any parent who is feeling the stress, which I have spoken to parents that are certainly under stress, to try and enjoy the opportunity that it's bringing. I know it's a little bit strange because it's stressful and some people just don't have the resources that the school expect them to have and they're under pressure, but I think my advice to parents is to just take a step back and enjoy the time that this new challenge is bringing us.
I can add to that as well, because we know what the benefits of home learning are, or learning not in a physical school. So I would concur with that, and the benefits are huge. The first one being that the child has got the attention of their parents, so they benefit from that. It's flexible, so it can be around the child's specific needs. We also know there are many studies that show that the progress of learning and the outcomes for those children that have been homeschooled is very, very good, is very, very high. There was a study of 20,000 students in America who were homeschooled, and their results were in the 70th and 80th percentile. So absolutely, the benefits of this can be immense.
I see what you mean there, because I've started to see my children flourishing. And with different ages, it is quite difficult. I've got a real variety. My 5-year-old needs a lot more interaction. The older two are much better at getting on with things. And I've learned about them actually and the things that they're interested in. So my middle child, he loves going off to research a topic. So we've had a couple of class talks that he's done for us with a PowerPoint presentation and lots of research. That's what he enjoys. But we've also been able to be really flexible in some of the things that we're talking about. So we had Mum's Music Appreciation Society last week. We have weekly lessons, Zoom lessons from their uncle in Australia, teaching them about Australia. We're doing the Joe Wicks PE. We've got, so many unlimited resources, actually. It's overwhelming the amount that have sprung up over the last couple of weeks. So, dancing, cooking, online lessons, etc. The world's our oyster, really. It's just trying to find trying to match things to their interest. But also, my main struggle is making sure I'm fitting in work as well. I work as an executive coach, and most of my work is done face-to-face with groups and one-to-one clients. And I'm shifting as much as I can virtually, but that takes effort. So it's getting up earlier in the morning, or trying to squeeze in bits and pieces throughout the day. And then when the 3 o'clock bell goes in my head, it's like, right, okay, outside everybody while mummy goes and works again.
And how are you managing the challenges of access to technology? Many families won't have computers at home, or if they do, they only have one, meaning that they can work while the children can't, or vice versa. How can families manage that kind of challenge?
I think schools are working, Matt. Some schools are able to provide a computer for families that don't have computers, but one thing that's free is talking, and every family has a facility to engage in talk and narrative with their children, which there's a seminal piece of research from 1996 that shows that the most important aspect of children's learning is parental input. And one thing that every single parent can do by way of input is engage in discussion with their children.
And Jacqueline, you referred to a study saying that outcomes for children who are homeschooled were usually better than average. But does homeschooling suit every child?
No, of course not. Every child is different. Every child learns in a different way. And don't forget, not every child's home situation is a perfect one. And sometimes life at home can be difficult. So, no, it certainly doesn't suit everybody. And I think that for those people it does suit, it gives back a whole load of confidence. And I think that the flexibility and the accessibility to learning is greatly increased. I mean, you heard Paula there talk about all the different things that they were doing, and that just illustrates the accessibility that the child has to learning that it didn't have in school. So it's not just sort of 9 till 3:30 in the afternoon anymore. And we see this in Wey Education as well, because over the last 15 years, we have many students and their families for who they are high achieving in some other field. So they might be a high achieving sports person, or an actor, singer, dancer, and they're often doing their academic studies at different times of the day, sometimes even during the night, to fit in around their other pursuits.
I think one of the real difficulties for my children, and probably the biggest gap, is their friends. So they're used to having break times together, messing around together, all that stuff that children really need. And I think for me, that is the biggest thing right now, is making sure that they're able to communicate with their friends. My eldest, who's 11, we held off getting a mobile phone for him until we knew that this was happening. And thankfully we did, because he is able to communicate with his friends at various points throughout the day. They set up house party and Zoom calls and things, and it's absolutely brilliant. But the littlest too as well, there are Zoom calls every day that some of the mums at school have set up, and they can join them if they like, and it makes a real difference to them. And I can see the boost that they get after speaking to their friends throughout the day.
And Paula, how important is it to maintain that contact with friends? Because for some children, that's really important, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is. Yes, as as Pauline just said, with Zoom, I've seen my own children, for example, with their computer screens, and they've got 20 little pictures of their friends, and sometimes it depends on what the school's using. The children can shut the teacher out and go into a chat room and have a chat amongst themselves, and then go back into the classroom. Yeah, it has to be technology, doesn't it, really, to keep in touch with friends, unless you're going to shout at them over the fence. It's important that parents facilitate, ensure that their children can keep in contact and speaking with friends. If you're in an apartment, you don't have much choice, though, do you? If you don't have a computer, that is just very difficult. It's a challenge, and it is up to the parents to step up with engaging with the children. In the context of friendships, that's a poor second best, but it's, as long as the children feel involved. I would say that I've seen in my own research with home educating families, involving your children in everyday aspects of the running of the family home, so especially in this situation now, I think makes them, so in addition, they're not just going to school and they're doing their schoolwork, but they become more involved than they would normally be in the running of the household. For example, if the washing machine breaks down, they get involved. So it's not the same as having your peers, but to engage them, they need to be more fully engaged in everyday
I would agree with that
aspects.
as well,
Yeah.
because it's all about control, isn't it? So what you're almost doing is giving back some control to that child. Deciding how things are done, when things are done. And that's something that we find that greatly improves the well-being of the child as well.
And is that the case of being in control of their own learning in terms of homeschooling? How does that add value?
Well, that's certainly our experience. Children who have struggled in school, particularly, is often because they feel this sense of lack of control. So it might be that they aren't able to learn when it's suitable for them during the time of day. It might be peer pressure. It might be not wanting to respond on the spot to particular questions. It could be anything, particularly with those with sensitivities. It could be something about the environment, too hot, too cold, too noisy, too uncomfortable. So once you hand that control back to the child, their learning instantly improves because obviously they're far more comfortable.
Yeah, this is one of the things I found with my research into home education, which was I undertook a 4-year study of home educated children in the United Kingdom. That aspect of control, and is control and having trust in the children. So some people say, if I don't keep the pressure on the child, they'll just watch television. I just say, well, let them watch television, because they'll only watch so much television before it becomes really boring. It's not something to be frightened of and immediately start to limit. They need to find their way. They need to be allowed to have some control over their learning, but it's for the parents to facilitate that, and just take a step back and allow the children to find their way.
Yeah, and we're also finding now, after all this time, that we're getting feedback from universities and colleges to really reiterate what you said about that. And what's happening is it's creating very much independent learners that they're not seeing in the same way that are coming from school applicants. So that first year intake at university that involves those that have been homeschooled or schooled in an alternative way, generally speaking, are creating much more independent learners who do far better in their first year at university than those who've studied in the classroom up until that point.
That's so interesting. I can actually see my eldest child becoming a bit more independent in his thinking already. So the first couple of days when we were trying to create this schedule, he was saying, well, where am I going to fit my maths and English in? And I had to keep trying to encourage him that actually the teachers aren't really expecting you to do all of this maths and English. It's there if you want to, but it's probably much more interesting for us now to pursue other creative pursuits that you probably don't have as much time for in school. There's no pressure either way. And he really needed to get himself out of his typical school mindset. And also, I think there's something in what you say about allowing them to be bored, because we've seen some sparks of creativity there. So probably saying, let's not watch TV for now. There's nothing on the schedule. You just come up with something. They'll typically come up with a little play or something together, and it'll be really fun. And actually, the relationship of my 3 children has become stronger over the last 2 weeks as well. So there are all of these benefits that we couldn't possibly. I mean, I'd love them to go back to school, of course I would, but we're trying to see the opportunity in this, as you've said.
And a lot
I
of
think.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think, usually when you have parents that are home educating, that are home educating, they've usually given some thought to it beforehand. They might have planned out, had ideas, thought about philosophy, read some books. And so I'm finding the comparison between home educators and those that are engaging in home-based education now, it's quite an exciting study to make of the two, because of course the parents now didn't have that lead-in time. It was just one day the children were at school and the next day they weren't. And so it's quite exciting really for me as a researcher to see how that's developing, how parents are adapting and the children. And they're adapting quite quickly. It's encouraging.
And that's the same for families where something goes wrong. So obviously this is happening to a lot of families at the same time at the moment. But in our experience, what happens is a family come to us sometimes because something has gone wrong. So a child might have fallen ill, or the school might be closed because of a flood or some kind of problem like that. Or it could be that they've moved to a country where the school system isn't really suiting their child. So suddenly they find they haven't chosen to home educate, but suddenly they find themselves in a situation where the child is no longer progressing in the way that they would expect. Sometimes has even got unhappy, and so they've had to do something about it. So they are often in the same position as so many parents are finding themselves in now, and it is interesting. Fortunately, they found us, so their problems are kind of solved. But obviously, that's not the case with the COVID-19.
So, what would be your piece of advice to parents who are now embarking on homeschooling? We hear a lot about the importance of routine. Would that be your main suggestion?
No.
I would say that structure is important, but routine can mean too many things as well. I think it's a question of what suits a particular child, and every single child is different. And as long as the learning and the system and the setup is appropriate for that child at that stage in their learning, then it's going to work. But I don't think you can generalize really. Some children thrive on structure. They can't deal without it. Others prefer a free approach, and will tell you, and almost you'll see their routine coming from them.
And Paula, I can see you disagree. Structure is not what you would recommend.
No, well, as I said, I think everybody has to find their own way. If in this new environment, you've got a child that's working his best at 10 o'clock at night, and it's not impacting too heavily on the parents, and it's not they have to stay up to, then let the child, as long as they're engaging in the schoolwork they're expected to engage in, and if it's not time related, like they don't have to be at 8 o'clock in the morning in a classroom, in a virtual classroom, then I would say, let them find their own way. And if it's not the hourly structure you used to have, well, I would say go with it if you can, so far as a family can. Of course, when you've got a lot of personalities and pulling in different directions in a household, I mean, I have 4 children, so there's, you just say you have to find out what works best for your individual situation.
And I wonder if I can then just finish by asking you, do you think that this will change the face of education forever? Do you think there'll be a lot more homeschooling afterwards, or do you think people will be desperate to send their children back to school?
I think there'll be more of a blended approach. I think that for some families who've been introduced to education technology, they might take more of that up. And I think for schools in particular, they're going to focus on having backup plans and different learning environments for when things happen where the school can't function as it normally does. And we see this in bad weather, inclement weather, infrastructure problems. Like I mentioned earlier, we've experienced schools who come to us because they've had floods or fires or some kind of infrastructure catastrophe. And then for children who become ill or long-term sickness in the family. So I think what it will do is just make the general awareness a lot greater, and there could be more of a blended approach taken by schools as well.
So Pauline, how about you? Are you tempted to make this arrangement permanent?
I don't think I could do it over the long term, but what I do know is I work with lots of clients to help them to be more resilient in organisations. And I'm applying some of those techniques to us right now and just seeing how we're being pushed out of our comfort zone, but we're growing as a result. And I think that's good for us as parents and for our children. We've just got a far more adaptable approach to the way things are going. But yes, I don't think I could do it forever.
All right, many thanks indeed to all my guests, Jacqueline Daniell, Dr. Paula Rothermel and Pauline Hughes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Search for TRT World Roundtable. But for now, from me and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.